Dan Williamson, Bradley Stalder, back, stack, hunting. That's right. Dan, we're here. It is March 5th. Well, we're recording it March 5th. This is going to go live March 6th. And already the free agency, wide receiver, rumblings will have probably changed, in the last 24 or next 24 hours since recording. But there's a lot of rumblings that are already happening. We want to talk about wide receiver fantasy fallout, landing spots, best landing spots, worst. We're going to dabble into a little bit of the rookies. But with all of these players that are possibly shifting, especially given the questionable landscape of the rookie, the wide receiver rookie class here in 2025, we can probably anticipate a lot of musical chairs for the wide receivers from 2024 to 2025. Dan, the biggest one that is standing out to me right now is Davante Adams' release. Was traded to the New York Jets for a mid-round pick. Like, it was a third-round pick. Yeah. And, just for kicks and giggles. It was like, do you remember that video where Aaron Rodgers was like, big reveal, Pat McAfee, guess who's behind me? Oh, it's not Randall Cobb coming out of retirement. It's not Jordy Nelson coming out of retirement. It's Davante Adams. Ta-da! And they played terribly.
Oh man, I tell you, the Jets absolutely bamboozled themselves on that trade. But and here's what they have to show for it: nothing. But this is my favorite time of year, Bradley. I just everything's in a holding pattern up until the combine, and then of course you got the combine and all that's going on, which is that's fun once you get to the last day and we actually get to players we really care about that much. But a lot of the combine, I'm not going to sit there and watch linebackers go through drills. I'm sorry, I don't play IDP. It's just not going to happen. But when you get to the that final day and all of a sudden we got quarterbacks and wide receivers and running backs and tight ends and everybody going, that's fantastic. And the best thing about it is all these teams get back from the combine and they've been talking to each other a ton. So all of a sudden we start getting movement because, they've got about a week to get their act together on the salary cap. And now they have a better idea of who might be interested in which players they have that nobody's really interested in, all that kind of stuff. So we start seeing the cuts, we start seeing the restructures, we start seeing the trades. And, it's all just a prelude to when free agency opens up, and then it's just all hell breaks loose. So absolutely my favorite time of year, that doesn't involve like actual football being played. So this is a great time. And, I suppose you want me to answer your question too.
I agree with you. It is a great time. It's one of the most vulnerable. If you're watching any of the content or you're listening to any of the content coming out of the combine, the GMs are the most, I can't think of a better word, vulnerable. They're definitely available to speak their minds. And that's where things like Coach Speak Index are really valuable in understanding, okay, sure, they're high on this player. They say they're high on this player, but how reliable is that? And that's one of the accounts that I have on notifications. So we'll talk about some of the players that were mentioned throughout the combine, even in passing. But yes, let's dive into Davante Adams a little bit because he was released by the Jets. He's had 7 straight 1,000-yard seasons. He's free to sign with anyone right now. That's the interesting part, is he's not beholden to a deadline. He can negotiate at any time with players. Are there some good landing spots for Davante Adams that you're hoping, you're praying, you're wishing you're way too early, never too early, best ball teams shares will reap the benefits of a good landing spot for Davante Adams?
Yeah, I think, Adams probably has several different spots where he would fit in pretty well. And, a lot of them are kind of the same things. You look for where they're looking for receivers and so forth like that. So, the Rams are probably going to be a team that might be interesting. But I think more like the Texans or somebody like that would be a little bit interesting. Titans could potentially be a team of interest as well. I think with Davante Adams, he can be pretty picky about where he signs, but he's going to want to get in early because he's going to be looking for, a good chunk of money. And, he doesn't want to be one of those guys who's, we get a weekend of free agency and he still doesn't have a spot. And now everybody spent, 80-90% of their money and they're looking at deals that are about, 3 or 4 million a year instead of, 15 or 16 or 18 or 20 or 25 or whatever. So I don't know exactly what his market's going to bear, but with the softer free agent rookie wide receiver classes, I think it definitely increases his appeal to NFL teams. So that works out pretty well for him. He'll be picky about where he signs. I think, he's going to be looking for money and or a title. But yeah, I think he's, he can still play. So I think that he's somebody that I definitely want to be a little bit more exposed to than I am right now. I'll put it that way.
So Davante Adams right now per spot track, I'm pulling up the data right now. He mentioned there's been a lot of rumblings about where could Davante Adams land. You mentioned the Rams are an interesting landing spot. I also think the Chargers could be an interesting landing spot. He wants something out west, reportedly. I don't know if the 49ers are willing to take a shot on him. If the 49ers bring in a player like Adams, though, I think that's more of an indication that they're not ready to trust a Pearsall with a full-time role, or they don't have full trust in a Juwan Jennings to take the next steps and be that player, or it's also a step back for Ayuk. Like, there's questions about whether Brandon Ayuk is going to be ready at the start of the season. We'll talk more about the 49ers in depth later, but I think a Davante Adams signing in San Francisco would indicate something is just not right in the wide receiver room. Per spot track, the calculated market value for Davante Adams is $13.6 million. So, even if it's 10, I think that's a little low for a player like Adams. So he was still able to produce. There were a couple cases of the dropsies throughout the season, which you wouldn't have expected with a player like Aaron Rodgers throwing to Davante Adams. But nevertheless, Adams headlines the free agent wide receivers right now, and I think still can continue to put up 1,000-yard seasons, 7 to 10 touchdowns, and be a wide receiver one on a team still. I think he has that capability even in his, age 32 season now? Yeah, he's 32.
Yeah, and he's aged fairly well. And of course, teams can always go a little bit higher just by, throwing in those not likely to be earned incentives, so they call them, which are basically ways that you can kind of sandbag against the salary cap and, tell a player, hey, you do well, you're gonna make a lot more than the sticker value of your deal, but the sticker value is what's going to count on the cap. So,
right.
That will probably help him out too. So I would guess he's probably going to have a somewhat incentive-weighted contract. And, at wide receiver 28 on Underdog, that's, you think about somebody, you're calling him a wide receiver one. I mean, I know you mean for his NFL team, but, I think wide receiver 28 is a pretty decent value. Looking at some of the players going around him, I definitely understand why he's at where he's at. I mean, but, honestly, I would rather probably have Davante Adams than Tet McMillan, for example, who's going before him. Just give me that guy who, has shown he can do it, who's shown he can, we don't know anything about, we think we know a lot about Tet McMillan, but we always find out about rookies that we know a lot less about them once they actually start playing than what we thought we did. So, Tet McMillan, he could be the next Brian Thomas Jr., or he could be,
N'Keal Harry.
Yes, exactly. So, there's a lot of ways that can go with, a player like that. Whereas Adams, I think, gives you a little bit more surety. So as you're building a best ball team, if you're looking for something, like if you need safety stability, probably Davante Adams is the way you want to go. If you're, already saying, hey, this is a place where I really need to add upside, then maybe you go McMillan. But I think Adams is a pretty good price here.
Yeah, wide receiver 28, one spot ahead of Addison. I view Adams multi-tiers above Addison. Sorry, Dan, I know you're a Minnesota homer.
I'm not mad about that at all. I mean, I like Addison for who he is and what he is. For goodness sake, he's my avatar on Twitter still, just because I never change it. But they are two different types of receivers that are going to command much different types of looks in offense. And also, Adams should be commanding more looks per game than Addison.
Well, also Adams over Rashee Rice, who's technically ahead of Adams in ADP. There's a lot of questions about whether Rashee Rice will return. We're going to dive a little deeper into Rice, but give me Davante Adams over Rashee Rice. Give me Davante Adams over DK Metcalf, over Rome Odunze, over Ted McMillan.
Over Zay Flowers,
even J-Mo. Yeah,
J-Mo.
I think that, we're talking
over
about one of the
Devontae
most
Smith.
mispriced players. Once you get into that Mike Evans, I think tier is the right place for
Harrison, Evans, Worthy, right
Davante Adams.
Yeah. He fits well there. I would definitely agree with that.
Well, with Adams out, is Garrett Wilson a buy candidate right now? Garrett Wilson, for the people at home, wide receiver 15 on Underdog Fantasy. He's being drafted 26th overall, so beginning of the third round. Is now a time to just be smashing Garrett Wilson, or was this already built into his price at 26th overall?
I mean, I think it's a fair price, especially on Underdog, which is insanely wide receiver heavy. But I prefer to, look at wide receivers on Underdog in relation to other wide receivers rather than in relation to anybody else, just because of, the way that the thirst for wide receivers is so real there. So, wide receiver 15 behind McLaurin, in front of JSN, in front of DJ Moore. I mean, I think that's about the right range. He's behind T. Higgins. I would probably put him in front of T. Higgins, another guy we can talk about later. But, I'm buying Wilson because, I think, what we heard coming out of the combine is the Jets are not afraid to go with Tyrod Taylor as their quarterback, at least to open up the season. I think they want to pair somebody else with Tyrod Taylor for sure. But Tyrod he's a better option than most people think. He takes care of the ball. He avoids sacks, and that tends to keep your offense more on schedule. It tends to, allow you to keep converting series and, or converting on series, getting those first downs. And, that helps Wilson, have a much better chance to get the targets we're looking for. I think Wilson works best as a target monster. He's not going to be the guy who's going to get you, 14 touchdowns or something in a season, I don't think. But I think he will be a target monster in this offense. You look at, I know there was something going around on X with, just kind of listing off all the Jets wide receivers that are currently on the team, and it's like Garrett Wilson and a whole lot of crap. And that will change.
How dare you besmirch Alan Lazard, Dan?
I'm sorry. The guy's got to be sitting around there, going, oh, I can seek a trade. Okay. I didn't really ask out, but okay, sure. I guess I'll look for a trade. But yeah, Wilson is, I think, going to be great. I think he's going to be one of those guys who's getting, 9-10 targets a game pretty easily. I expect him to end up north of 150 targets on the season. If he stays healthy, he could end up in the 170, 175 range pretty easily, I think. That's something I'm definitely in on.
Yeah, 2023, Garrett Wilson, 168 targets, a 30% target share. That's a pathway for top 5 wide receiver. That's a pathway for Nico, Puka, like CD Lamb, Malik Neighbors, those types of production. And the problem is the quarterback position was atrocious when Aaron Rodgers was out in 2023. And then Davante Adams was added mid-season. Wilson still put up 153 targets, 100 receptions, career high in receptions, 1,200 air yards, set a career high 7 receiving touchdowns. If it's Tyrod Taylor, he's not going to turn over the ball. He's going to keep drives going. He's methodical. He is a conservative game manager with a little bit of rushing. This is something worth monitoring for the Jets, because if Tyrod Taylor could be like a top 20 quarterback for fantasy, just because he's going to not turn the ball over and keep the Jets in games and get the ball to Garrett Wilson. Like the calculus is very easy if you're on the Jets. Get the ball to Garrett Wilson, get the ball to Breece Hall, and call it a day. So,
yep.
yeah, I think.
And by the way, I pronounce it Tyrod just because he's got wheels. So, anytime you got wheels, you got to have a Tyrod. Sorry.
I love the pun. I'm here for it. It's fantastic. You know what else is fantastic? Fast Draft. Fast Draft is fantastic. Check out Fast Draft at draftfast.app.
I am proud to announce that Fast Draft now has an all-defense game called D-Up. That's right, fans of IDP finally have a real money best ball game that they can play. No more manually setting up leagues every time you want to do a draft. No. Now you can play for $10,000, $2,000 to first. Could draft up to 30 teams, all defense. And the best part, balanced scoring, tackles for loss, pass breakups. It all factors in. Just draft 6 defensive players, top 4 into your lineup every week. It's that easy. It's so easy that this isn't just for IDP people. If you love the NFL, then you'll love this game. And for the first time with Fast Draft, you can sweat both sides of the ball on Sunday. So use your host's promo code to get a $25 deposit match, and you'll love this D-Up contest because it's about time we got one.
It's about time.
Yes.
Dan, I know you don't play much IDP. I don't play a ton of IDP either. There's just, the guys that I play with aren't also interested in it, but I'm in a couple IDP leagues, and it's fun to find the deep sleeper. It's fun to find the guy who, off the bench is getting 10 tackles, and the rookie that steps up after an injury. Like, those are very interesting to me. But I'm in Michigan, so unfortunately I can't play any of the Fast Draft, but that's why you need to play on my behalf. Go to fastdraft.app and use the promo code STACK for a 100% deposit match up to $100 on Fast Draft. That's right. Use promo code STACK.
Win it for Bradley. That's what we're asking for, people.
Go
out there, get yourself registered, and win it for Bradley.
Win it for me. There we go, peeps. Who else is winning it for us in fantasy when he's in the lineup, at least, and that's T. Higgins, Dan. T. Higgins tagged by the Cincinnati Bengals. Is he a fantasy target for us? And if so, how much are you factoring in his injury history, his soft tissue issues that he's had the last couple of years into your calculus of drafting a player like T. Higgins, who put up the second highest rate of top 5 weeks among all receivers last year?
So I'm interested to get your take on this, Bradley, before I give mine. So, I generally go first, but this time I think you should go first.
Okay. T. Higgins is a player that I think will have his big games, and I think is a better best ball play than a set your lineup. He will be drafted this year to be the wide receiver 2 on your team, but I'm not comfortable with him being a set it and forget it wide, like 12 to 15 wide receiver on a weekly basis. We've seen, even in games where he's healthy, he's been a 0 at times. But when he hits massively. As I mentioned earlier, his wide receiver 1 rate, the only player who was higher last year, it was Jamar Chase. Both of them over 20% rates of top 5 weeks. And the other part that I'm thinking about is the Cincinnati Bengals defense was just so bad last year. And Joe Burrow had no option but to get into these big shootout games where you have to throw it downfield to Chase and Higgins constantly. There was nothing else. Sorry, Chase Brown, but he did okay to start, and then it was fine the rest of the way. I wonder if the Bengals look at this and say, you know what, we're gonna try to extend T. We're gonna try to extend Jamar. I do think that both of those, if I'm a betting man, I think both of those things do occur, that they do get long-term extensions for T and Jamar. But I wonder if they look at, can they find another wide receiver to step up? They were hoping that it was Jermaine Burton. The Yoshivas, was able to do some things occasionally, but they tried to address it with a day 2 pick last year. Unfortunately, the character concerns came in the way of Burton's development. So it wouldn't surprise me if they try to address that wide receiver 3 position that could be if Chase or Higgins miss time. Like, the Bengals can't afford to not have both Higgins and Chase on the field to be competitive. So I wonder if they address it in the draft again. They try to sign another free agent that can move into the slot, that can move outside, that can just be very flexible. That's what I'm thinking about in terms of the Cincinnati Bengals as a whole, and that would most negatively affect T. Higgins.
Yeah, and I understand, why the Bengals are tagging Higgins again. I understand that they want to get the long-term deal. But I'm not sure if this is what's best for them to actually, as an NFL team, make the playoffs. Because the thing is Burrow, with such a terrible defense, Burrow is caught in shootouts all the time. And you really have to be, when your defense is as bad as the Bengals was, you really have to be perfect every possession on offense. And, that's tough for even a Joe Burrow to manage. I would, if I were the Bengals, I would be, either doing a tag and trade, or else I would just, let him go and take the compensatory pick next year. But I think, since he probably is going to be in Cincinnati, if he ever plays a full slate, his price is fine. But I'm not sure it's a great bet for that. And also, even if he does, it's really hard for a quarterback to support 2 wide receiver 1s, and that's almost what we're asking for with a wide receiver 13 price tag. You really need T to be basically a back-end wide receiver 1. And at that price, you're also betting on Burrow's health, because he has not been always the most durable player either. So, there are, several ways that this can go bad, and he's so close to what I think is his peak value that it's really hard for me to push the button there, especially when I can push the button on a Garrett Wilson. I can push the button on a Terry McLaurin, both of whom I have more confidence in. That they're gonna step up and probably have as good or better seasons than T. Higgins. Even Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think you could make the argument for him as well. He's also going after Higgins. So, if Higgins falls, even just a couple spots, I'd probably be okay taking him. But, if McLaurin or Wilson for sure are on the board, I'm probably going them over T. Higgins. Most of the time, I don't want to be totally shut out on T, but I'm not prioritizing me either at this price.
Yeah, addressing the wide receiver position is going to be one that I'm monitoring. The positional value, obviously, the 20% wide receiver, the ceiling is there for T. Higgins. It's just a matter of what is the floor, and looking at the other wide receivers in that range, like among wide receivers, just in like the flex rate, T. Higgins last year, only 60%. Like, to give you context, like Jamar Chase was 77% of the time was a flex play. Justin Jefferson was 69% of the time. So like, there's just more busting that happens with a T. Higgins type. And even like a Puka Nacua, 67% of the time was at least a flex play for you. And he left some games early, Dan. Mm-hmm. Like these elites, we're not talking about T. Higgins being one of the elites. Sorry, he's just probably tiers below. And then there's the injury risks and the positional risk. There's just a lot of other factors that play with T. Higgins. So I agree with you. Player 2, kind of like soft fade until we get a little bit more information. Like, not hard fade. This is not like a player we're saying this is completely mispriced. Just maybe being a little soft on it.
Soft. Yep, definitely agree.
All right, we got some more news this past weekend, Dan, that Deebo Samuel traded to the Washington Commanders for a 5th-round pick, but the Commanders are picking up the rest of his salary, 1 more year, because remember, Deebo held out for a while. He put some Instagram things up a couple years ago. People were worried, oh, he's holding out, blah, blah, blah. Everything was fine for the first year. He crushed and then struggled with injuries and drops and everything, and now he's got 1 more year left on that contract to Washington. Who do you think this helps the most in San Francisco?
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting question. I mean, you can go back and look at the past 3 years, and arguably Kittle has been the biggest beneficiary because he's averaged 4 more points per game with Deebo out. This isn't a huge sample size. It's I think it's 7 games over the past 3 years, but it definitely matters. Ayuk was less than 1 point per game more as far as when Deebo was out. Juan Jennings was also he was 5 points per game more, but there was only 1 game where Deebo didn't play and Pearsall did. And I think the Ricky Pearsall effect is probably going to hit Jennings more so than it's going to hit Ayuk or Kittle. So, Jennings, I think, is, they didn't pay him a ton. I mean, they gave him what I thought was a nice contract extension last year for a player of his caliber. I think he got about $15 million or something like that for 2 years. Which is really nice, and it's a good reward for a player who's done everything that's been asked of him. Who can go out there and play that X receiver if needed. He can do a lot of things. He's very versatile, much like Deebo Samuel. But Ricky Pearsall, he's got that that 1st-round draft capital on him, and he did look very good once he finally got himself back into game shape and worked into the the game plan and everything else towards the end of the season. So I think Pearsall is probably gonna do a little bit better than what Jennings does. But Kittle is my ultimate answer here. I think Kittle. I've been ever since this trade. I've been just hammering Kittle in best ball drafts, both on Underdog and on FFPC.
Yeah, Kittle's such an easy click. What we maybe don't realize, Dan, is he had a better season last year than Brock Bowers or Trey McBride. He just did. His best ball value rating put him at 48th overall, 7.54. Compare that to Bowers and McBride, 58 and 59th overall, 6.63 and 6.56. So it was a clear tier difference between Kittle and the other two, Bowers and McBride. And sure, Brock Bowers is the hot new thing. We expect a quarterback upgrade. Jacoby Myers is the only other wide receiver at this point on the roster. Gardner Minshew cut. So sure, the hot new thing is Brock Bowers, but let's not forget George Kittle can have monster games, and with Deebo gone, that's part of his game is middle of the field, is yards after catch. Those are the types of plays that Deebo was able to do pretty regularly throughout his time in San Francisco, and now Kittle's going to be feasting. I agree with you. Easy click in San Francisco. Anyone that it hurts in San Francisco?
I don't really think it hurts anybody. It's just basically addition to all the other players by subtraction. The only way it would hurt is if they brought somebody in to try to specifically replace his role.
Yeah.
But I just don't see them doing that. They've got bigger fish to fry, and I think they feel like they've got enough players on offense that they can work around losing Deebo. So nobody I'm too concerned about there.
Well, it's got to hurt somebody in Washington, right? You bring in a 20% target share guy plus another however what percent rush share. The intentional touches, the scheme touches are there for Deebo as part of that offense. I mean, Terry McLaurin obviously plays mostly on the outside, but where's Deebo's role going to fit in this Washington offense?
Yeah, I think it's the E-boys that pay the price, Eckler and Ertz. Ertz is probably back, but Eckler could even get cut for a small cap savings depending on what they end up doing at running back in the draft. I wouldn't be surprised to see them add to the running back room. So, and Ertz, basically where he was kind of making his living, is the same places that Deebo is probably going to make his living as well. Though Ertz is still going to be good in the red zone in a lot of ways that it's just impossible for Deebo to do. I don't see anybody getting hurt really, really badly on this other than Eckler possibly getting cut. And I agree with you. McLaurin, this shouldn't hurt him at all. This might even help him because it's just going to attract more attention, in the, closer to the line of scrimmage, and make things a little bit easier on McLaurin on those medium and deep routes.
Now, there's been a lot of chatter, Dan, across NFL circles that Deebo Samuel put on some weight, that Deebo Samuel looked out of shape, that Deebo Samuel had a little bit of a tummy, if you know what I mean. Maybe he had one too many Big Macs, if you know what I mean. And that's what led to
the Eddie Lacy school of,
Yeah. So the big question is, do you think that Deebo, obviously they traded for him. They're paying him a lot of money. There's a lot of sponsorship. So they're going to give him opportunities. But is Deebo still good enough to hold up throughout the season? We've seen Deebo struggle with injuries. We've seen him struggle with the dropsies from time to time. The efficiency metrics weren't there in 2024 compared to previous seasons, like yards after the catch. Is Deebo he's on the wrong side of the age apex? Is he starting to feel washed here?
I mean, he could be, but I'm not ready to say that for sure. I mean, you look at last year, he had pneumonia, he had a calf injury, and he had a rib injury. And, he was kind of dealing with at least two of those at one time for a big chunk of the season. So I'll cut him some slack on that. I don't think every year is going to be quite like that. I'm not really worried or concerned about his weight. I think he's going to go in there with, I think he's going to have something to prove in Washington. So I don't expect his conditioning or any of that to be a problem. My main worry is he takes a lot of punishment and, with the type of, routes and, handoffs and everything else that he takes, the jet sweeps, all that kind of stuff. He's in the mix. He gets tackled by linebackers a lot more. And it's a lot of punishment on a somewhat older guy. I'm not super excited to draft him based on that at wide receiver 36. I can get Jaden Reed at wide receiver 38. And I think he's, I know people don't like comparing Jaden Reed and Deebo, but there are some similarities there. I think Jaden Reed is a younger and better version. So I would rather Jaden Reed at his price than Deebo at his price. But again, Deebo is not a player I want to be totally out on completely. So I'll have some. How about you?
Yeah, well, I got to be a little careful, Dan, talking about people's weight, like, oh, he's so out of shape. Oh, and I look at myself in the mirror like, okay, Bradley, you got to pull yourself together. No wonder you're dropping things, like.
Yeah,
maybe.
But it's easier to catch the kids at your school and than it is to try to catch a Deebo Samuel or something like that. So
it's fair enough.
Catch you some slack.
Yeah, thanks.
And
Appreciate
it. Your agility is also unmatched with as many kids as you have around the house.
Well, as long as they're sleeping upstairs, I think we're in good shape, Dad. Speaking of lots of movement, we're expecting a lot of movement from Chris Godwin. He's expected to walk in free agency. See how I segued that, Dan? That was pretty good. There we go. We're winning here on the Stack Hunters. Make sure you guys are smashing the subscribe button here on Profiler now. Make sure you're hitting the like button, sharing with your friends, sharing with your enemies, your league mates and sleeper that you want to annoy with additional links. Give them a look. Give us a look. Drop the link in your chats. Chris Godwin is expected to walk in free agency. he's coming off of a mid-season injury that cost him the rest of the year. Are there some good landing spots for him? Do you think he's going to be ready? Like, there's a lot of questions about this situation with Chris Godwin because he absolutely crushed last year for fantasy. In my best ball value rating, Chris Godwin was player number 8. Player number 8. Just so valuable for us. But unfortunately, small sample size, and now he's playing to move on. How much do you think this helps McMillan too? Like, Evans has got to be a lock for top 12 wide receiver. There's a lot of dominoes. How are you examining this situation, Dan?
Yeah, I'm not convinced he's going to walk in free agency. I think the Bucks definitely still want him back. I think he wants to, that would be his preference to end up with the Bucks again. But there's a limit to what sort of a discount he's going to take. This is probably his last good contract that that he's going to get, and so I think he's going to be concerned about the money, and he'll also be looking, if they don't get anything done, before free agency starts, then I think he's probably gone, because I think somebody is going to throw a boatload of cash at him. And, I'm not too worried about him being ready to start 2025. I think he'll be playing week 1, but I do wonder how long it is until he's the same player. This dislocated ankle thing, the fibula, all that, this is the same sort of thing that's tripped up Tony Pollard and Mark Andrews, and it's not nothing, that's for sure. It takes a while to fully recover from that, though you can play. So as far as free agent landing spots, I think the Rams would be ideal. Texans or Patriots are probably the next best. I think all those would be really nice fits for him. So I would be happy to see him go to any of those places. And obviously, if he does, that's going to be a huge benefit for McMillan.
Yeah, imagine, if you will, a world where A.J. Brown and Chris Godwin end up on the Patriots. You heard about that the Patriots are inquiring about acquiring A.J. Brown. Mike Vrabel wants to get his boy back. So
yeah, I'm sure they're interested. I bet they are.
I'm sure they are. All 30 other teams are interested too. Are you a believer in Jalen McMillan? I think, I don't know how to feel right now, immediately, because I felt like, and maybe you can offer your insight too onto this, that a lot of the McMillan volume was because there was no one else. That it was Godwin was out or Mike Evans was out, and that he was just maybe an above average guy, and they needed somebody to throw it to. Like the Cade Otton, was getting a ton of targets because so many guys were out. Like, that's the line of thinking that I had toward McMillan, but he also played okay. I don't know how much to buy into Jalen McMillan for 2025.
Well, I think if you try to take the last third of a season or so at face value, you're probably going to get burned on that. I don't think he's he had incredible touchdown luck. He was still doing it on not a huge number of targets. So, but of course, he's a rookie. It's legal for rookies to get better. It's legal for him to improve. We will allow it.
Wait a minute, Dan. Are you sure?
Saying that's what I've heard. They've been relaxing the rules in the NFL. So I think, but I just don't think I don't think he's that good of a player. Some analysts that I really trust on wide receivers. Matt Harmon, for one, he's always been a little bit lukewarm on McMillan, and when analysts like that have a great track record, talking about wide receivers, say, yeah, just pump the brakes a little bit. That's something I'm going to listen to. So I am pumping the brakes a little bit on McMillan. Again, not a full fade or anything like that, but he's not somebody I'm drafting aggressively right now.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was feeling as well. Just the touchdown equity was very, very high, unsustainable, as you mentioned. The opportunity was plentiful, but if Chris Godwin walks, then it's just McMillan and Evans. Maybe Tampa is quietly looking for, I don't know, a Cooper Kupp. That would be kind of fun.
Yeah. And also the other thing that gives me pause, I was double checking here. Cade Otton was out week 16, 17, and 18. So, basically as soon as Mike Evans came back, Otton was out almost immediately after that. So Jaden McMillan was filling in both for Evans early, and then all of a sudden Evans comes back, and all of a sudden he's filling in a little bit for Otton as well. And of course Godwin was never there during any of that time. So there's a lot going on. He was definitely the right man at the right place, right time. I just don't know if we're going to be able to see that in 2025.
All right, breaking news, Dan. Okay, not so breaking. Just today, it happened today, Wednesday, March 5th. DK Metcalf requests a trade, and Tyler Lockett is cut from Seattle. This wide receiver core could look very different for the Seahawks come 2025. Just Jackson Smith and Jigba, maybe a Jake Bobo. But other than that, there's a lot of rumors surrounding Metcalf and the Packers, Metcalf and the Chargers, even stemming from last year. Do you think DK Metcalf gets traded? And if so, are my Packers the team?
Yeah, then they can have the Christian Watson who actually stays healthy.
I'm not offended. I wish that Christian Watson would stay healthy so that we could see what an amazing player he is in a full-time role. Like, Christian Watson is #good at football. Problem is he can't stay on the field, Dan. Yeah,
definitely. And I'm going to be selling the news on Metcalf almost regardless of what happens, just because he's really he's not one of those players that has ever really shown out to be a true wide receiver one. He has the tricks that he can do well. He can do exceedingly well. But he does not have the full route tree that you need to be a true wide receiver one. I think he's kind of stuck at wide receiver two. That's pretty much what I expect out of him anywhere that he goes. So I'm not going to be drafting him aggressively. Right now he's going at wide receiver 26. My guess is if he goes anywhere, enthusiasm is going to probably send him up around the Mike Evans, Xavier Worthy, area. I think he'd probably go in front of Davante Smith. Do you think I'm crazy about that?
Yeah, that's probably where he'd end up. And the problem, Dan, is that like DK Metcalf is if Joe Burrow was not T. Higgins' quarterback.
Yeah.
Like they're virtually the same player.
I would actually take I think T. Higgins is probably a much better player in a vacuum than DK Metcalf.
Yeah.
DK Metcalf can do the things that he does well better than T. Higgins, but T. Higgins can do more things.
Like it.
So,
like it.
There you go.
Fair enough. We'll keep her rolling here, but before we do, a word from Matt Kelly about our Dynasty Dominator app, appropriate as we're starting to talk more about the rookies, and we'll talk about a very interesting rookie after the break.
Hey, what if I told you there was a Dynasty app where you could get player lifetime values, evaluate trades, including draft picks out to 2028, compare the advanced metrics of two players, look up the sentiment, buy, sell, hold on players, Well, there is a mobile app that has all of that and more called the Dynasty Dominator, and it's $5 in the App Store on Google Play. This is my gift to you, the most affordable Dynasty League domination app available today. And if you already have it, the 2025 class is ready to download. Let's go.
That's right, Dan. Let's go. Let's go. We will.
It's such a great app. I know. I mentioned it last show, but that is one of my favorite apps. I use that all the time. So if you're into Dynasty, do yourself a favor. It's worth it.
Because not only does it give you trades, like you can put in trades, but you can also look at the lifetime value of players. But you can also compare players. That's one of my favorite features of it. Because I was doing writing some rookie profiles for a rookie draft guide, and I was like, this player feels like this other player. And I pulled them up, compared side by side. And let me see if I can find, I don't even know. I just thought of it right now. Rookie profiles. I pulled up, I was like, what if Travion Henderson was Travis Etienne?
Mm-hmm.
What if like Quinshon Judkins was maybe a better Najee Harris? Like at least that gives you some comparisons. They've got similar measurables, things like that. And if the draft capital is pretty close, great, fantastic. But one of the profiles, as I used the player comparison tool for, Dan, and he's on our show sheet, is wide receiver / cornerback Travis Hunter. I put him into our player comparison, and I was like, you know what? If he gets first round draft capital and he's very skinny and like a little over 6 feet, who's that remind us of? Oh, a Devonta Smith. What if he's better Devonta Smith? You know, and so that's my player comp for Travis Hunter. Problem is he's being viewed as a two-way player. How much are you reading into teams wanting to use him significantly on the defensive side, and how does that impact your view of Travis Hunter as a fantasy asset?
Yeah, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that he is going to be used primarily as a cornerback. I think that's the most likely outcome, but that's not a certain outcome for sure. And at wide receiver 48, I think you're getting to the point where it's a bet worth making because, I'm sorry, he's at
58
sorry.
now. Yeah,
58,
he's at
sorry.
58 now. He's been dropping, Dan. He's been ever since
all of a sudden I'm
combine
like, wait a second, that doesn't seem right. No, it was 58.
Sorry, we skipped Cooper Kupp section. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yep. But it's really it's even if he does play defense, it's hard to conceive of a world where a team drafts a player like that and he's not getting at least a few plays on offense every week. And he definitely I feel like has got what it takes to be to maximize however many plays he gets on offense. They're not going to run him out on the field and, just have him be a decoy all the time. He's going to have some designed looks. So I think the risk is kind of baked in a little bit. I know that you probably feel the same way. You've got a lot of different ways this can go, but do you feel like wide receiver 58 is pretty fair?
I think it is very fair. If you take him and he doesn't hit, it's not the end of the world. It's not like a significant amount of draft capital. Because for reference, wide receiver 58, oh man, it just reset I thought I was going to have it ready. And then Underdog decided, you know what? We're going to reload the app. Wide receiver 58 is approximately like 100, now 57, but it's 11th round, beginning of 11th round. Not hitting on an 11th round player, even if you have a decent amount of that particular player, when the upside is rookie year Devonta Smith, who averaged he was like a 900-yard receiving wide receiver 36 in the first year. Like wide receiver 58, 57's fine to take the chance that he actually pays off, especially near the end in the fantasy playoffs, because maybe the team who takes him starts doing well near the tail end of the season and they shift away from using him on defense mid-year. Like you could see a team almost experiment year one and find out like, okay, where is he in game speed able to perform at the NFL level, not just in the underwear Olympics, or in college against questionable, a wide range of competition, because Colorado would play some really good teams and Colorado would also play some duds. So I think that's, worth the risk of being slightly overweight or at least at ADP with Travis Hunter, because the upside exists there. And we're at a point this season, in this offseason, where we don't know. We just have so much unknown that the risk of taking a zero is not bad at this point.
Right. And, at wide receiver 58, kind of the way I look at it is that makes him basically, a low end wide receiver 5. If everybody was, just drafting wide receivers at a exactly even rate throughout the draft, he would be your wide receiver 5. I would be a little bit nervous with him as my wide receiver 5. As a wide receiver 6, now we're to the point where I want to start making some gambles like this. So,
yep.
If I've already got 5 wide receivers in the hopper and, I get on the clock and, Travis Hunter is there, he's definitely going to be in consideration for me at that point.
All right, just a couple more, Dan. Our time is running short. Rashee Rice, wide receiver 27. He continues to fall a little bit here and there. Xavier Worthy rising just a little bit. Evan Ringler and I just finished the best ball rankings for Player Profiler. You should check them out on the player rankings page. We worked very hard to put in not only our favorite players, but also ensuring that we're making you overweight on players we think that are going to hit very strongly. And we have Rashee Rice significantly lower than consensus. His ADP is wide receiver 27, like multiple rounds later. We're not going to get any Rashee Rice at this point. Is that the right move, Dan? Do you think fading Rashee Rice into oblivion at this point in the offseason is the right move?
I do not. As you probably know, Bradley, from our hardway draft, I was pretty aggressive on taking Rashee Rice. I think that he's probably a wide receiver 1 anytime he plays, and I don't see his injury really lingering into 2025. Suspension is your risk, and I think it would have to be 6+ games to scare me off of him. And even at 6 games, I'd probably still take some shares at that price. Because he's going to be a wide receiver 1 when he plays. I think that's almost without a doubt. If he's healthy in that offense, he's, I love Worthy too. I'm a big Worthy fan. I want plenty of Worthy as well. But I'm going to make sure I have some Rice, because I think especially coming down the stretch where games really matter, if you can move a team into, the finals and, you started trying to advance your team, having Rice there, probably not as many people are going to have him, especially if a lot of people are fading him. Fewer teams will have him, so it'll be a good thing.
All right. Dan and Bradley differ significantly on Rashee Rice. You love to see the difference. You love it. You love to okay. Yeah. Dan was very big on the hardway draft. For those who are not familiar, $250 entry, best ball, closed league. And we are closing up. I'm waiting on Theo. He's making one more pick, and then it's me and then Dan. I've been surrounded by these two sharks this entire draft. It's not been fun. I've been sniped on both sides multiple times throughout the draft, especially on some of the rookies. Speaking of rookies, I've got a standout wide receiver that went under the radar, Dan, that nobody's talking about Do you have any wide receivers you want to discuss before we call it a night?
As far as rookies go, I don't know. I mean, I think this class has a lot of role players, contributors, things like that. Obviously Matthew Golden stood out at the combine, and it cemented him for first round status. But I'm not sure how much I'm going to get of him in best ball, because I look at players going around him like Josh Downs, Darnell Mooney, even Rashad Bateman. I think they might be better bets at cost, because we don't, at least until we see where Golden lands. He definitely could land well, but it's going to take him a while to integrate himself into the offense. I'm a little bit concerned about some of his, basically his analytics, as far as like, yards per route run, targets per route run, all that kind of stuff. He's just not, he's not where I would like to see him to be a first round pick. And the same thing's kind of true of his teammate, Isaiah Bond. He's wide receiver 67. I was fading him hard pre-combine, and I'm fading him even harder now. If he's not fast, I don't know what he is. Analytically, he was not good, so he never really dominated in any way in college. So he's another player that I'm really kind of staying away from. Golden I'll have some of. Isaiah Bond I think is a full, hard, complete fade for me.
Oh, I'm fading Isaiah Bond so hard. When I was asked to write up Jody Smith asked me to write up Isaiah Bond, and I said, player comp, Anthony Schwartz.
Ooh.
Tell me I'm wrong, Dan.
No, I'm sorry, Bradley. I cannot tell you you're wrong.
One player that stood out that I think is worth putting on the deep sleeper radar, Dante Thornton. If you're asking who is Dante Thornton, get familiar with Dante Thornton. Dude is an absolute beast. He played at Tennessee, 13 games, 25.5 yards per reception. That was the best among any receiver in college. With at least 34 targets. Okay, with at least 34 targets. He was second among all receivers with 34 or more targets in yards per route run. Dude is a monster. He is 6'5", 205. He ran a 4.30, 99th percentile 40-yard dash, 100th percentile speed score. We have not seen a player like this ever. Like, fastest wide receivers in combine history who are 6'3" or taller. Number 4, DJ Chark. Tied at 4, Julio Jones. Tied at 2, DK Metcalf. Tied at 2, Brian Thomas Jr. Number 1, Dante Thornton Jr. Dan, holy buckets. Give me some Dante Thornton Jr., baby.
Yeah, and, it's the Tennessee offense is a hard one to dissect, too. So, I think he's a fun player.
Deep sleeper, fun.
Deep sleeper, fun. Will be interesting to see where he goes in the draft. If he goes up in the first round, like BTJ and players like that, then yeah, fantastic. I will, he'll be the biggest value you ever saw.
We're calling it now, March 5th. Dante Thornton Jr. Dan, just to let you know, unless Theo's listening right now, which he won't be, because we're recording this, he's not going to see it till I make the pick. I'm taking Thornton Jr. with this next pick. So sorry, Dan. Sorry, Dan.
It's quite all right. I'm done at wide receiver in that draft. So I have built my squad. I feel very confident in my wide receivers. So
excellent.
And I have built my wide receivers specifically to deal with the fact that I may not have Rashee Rice for a while. So I've got that baked into my my strategy, so it's all good.
Beautiful. Well, Dan, this is always fun. Make sure you guys are checking out Dan on X at Overhyped Sleeper with no E at the end. You can follow me at FF Stalder on X. Dan, it's been great. Any words for the people before we're done?
Yeah, this is, like I said at the beginning, it's a fun time of year. This is a great time to be drafting because player values are really going to be starting to move all over the place. The quicker you are to react to them or even to predict them in advance and, figure out what's likely to happen, you can make some really nice best ball teams. Some of my highest advance rates come in these early tournaments. So, I feel like I have an advantage, and I'm not really doing anything that nobody else, or anybody else couldn't do. As far as just analyzing the situations and making good, educated guesses.
All right. On behalf of Dan, I'm Bradley. Till next time, good luck in the best ball streets, everybody.